When Kings Island opened in 1972, a number of attractions had been transported from Cincinnati's Coney Island for the park's debut season. Among those attractions, the Skyride. Hello, everybody. I'm Don Helbig alongside Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics. Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about. So, Ryan, Skyride, obviously before your time, uh, but you've probably seen pictures and heard different stories about it.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I can't tell you how many people that I've met that have said, not necessarily that like nostalgically remember the Sky Ride because at this point it was a long time ago, but that have been to other parks and they're like, man, I wish Kings Island had a Sky Ride. Were you a regular on the Sky Ride?
I was a regular on the Skyride, rode it at Coney Island. It was a great way to see the Midway at that park. And then with Kings Island, gave you a nice view coming from the Oktoberfest area or over to Hanna-Barbera Land. You crossed over International Street, in front of the Eiffel Tower. It was a great visual as you walked into the park, very colorful
Mhm.
with the gondolas. You can see some video of it in the Partridge Family episode where there's one scene where they're near the racer, age and weight, and behind them a Skyride's going by. So, uh, it was a really, really nice looking attraction.
Was it similar in look and feel to the one at Cedar Point?
In a lot of ways, the gondolas were a little bit different, but yeah, in a lot of ways, similar to Cedar Point. When it was at Coney Island, it was about 300 feet shorter. It had, three of the support towers. So they added a fourth one when it moved to Kings Island. Added that extra footage there. Ordered some more cars to lengthen it out to fill that much of the attraction. But to me, it was just something that you wanted to get a nice view of the park. Great visuals from up there. You could see down Coney Mall. You didn't go over to Coney Mall, but you could see down Coney Mall when you went across. You went over top of the Enchanted Voyage, and then you kind of dropped in. Now there's still remnants of it, the gift shop in Planet Snoopy, Snoopy's Boutique. That is where one of the stations were, the load and unload stations there, and the other one was in Oktoberfest. So if you look right now where the new Cargo Loco attraction is, it was kind of like right behind there a little bit, and that was one of the load sections as well.
Yeah, and then there's also, I believe there's a footer over by the Cantina patio that no matter what the theme has been, it's always been covered by a boat. But if you look, there's like a canoe laying on top of it, but it's clearly a square footer, and that's from the Sky Ride. Now, one thing that I
Yeah,
remember, maybe it was Gary Walks who said that it's kind of a fallacy to say that the ride was transported from Coney Island because really it was only the upright supports. They'd gotten all new cables, and I believe he said they got all new vehicles too. But you mentioned that they supplemented them. Do you remember distinctly if they got more?
I remember adding there were new cars that were added, but they were still the originals as well too, because it wasn't that old of a ride when it was at Coney Island.
Mhm.
But it was a popular attraction. It was one way to get from Oktoberfest over into the kids area or near Rivertown. When you got off the ride in that side, you only had to walk short distance to be in the Rivertown area of the park. Over 12 million guests rode it from 1972 to 1979. I think it's 12,273,796. I think that's the total number of riders that were on it.
Mhm.
Um, but it was a nice visual, and it kind of was quietly removed after the 1979 season. Not a lot of fanfare,
Mhm.
no advance notice that it was gone. I just remember going to the park in 1980 and it wasn't there anymore. So it was one of those kind of things where there wasn't social media like you have today. There wasn't any, hey, come get your last rides on the Sky Ride. There was no notification that was happening.
Do you think that it was a like a last minute decision where they found something that was not economical to repair, or do you think that they didn't want people to know that they were removing it? Like, have you heard anything about that?
Well, as I got to know the park's marketing department, in the early 1980s, when I started riding the racer, one of the things that they had told me was that it had been removed because it was getting difficult to buy parts for the ride. I could buy that, that it was difficult to buy the parts. Now, there was an incident in 1977 that a lot of, people think was the reason that it came down, but, they wouldn't have kept it up for 2 years, past that, had that been the prime reason. But it was April 24th, 1977. There was like a wind, hailstorm, and three cars kind of jammed together, which stranded 36 riders between 19 gondolas. They were stranded for up to 8 hours, I think, up there. I think that was the length of time. And there were photos, in the Cincinnati Enquirer, the Cincinnati Post, television stations, were going live outside the park, talking about that. And, from where the marquee is located on Kings Island Drive, they could shoot in, and it was high enough that you had a clear view for TV of those guests being stranded and how they were being removed from the rides. So a very scary situation at that time. But that was the one thing I think a lot of people remember about that ride, and I wish they didn't, because it really was part of the Coney Island, that piece of it coming over to Kings Island, being a part of it. It was their original attraction in 1972, so I wish it was still there.
I do too. For me, it's like I would love to see a Skyride come back. I think it will someday, but I think the reality is it'll run the length of Coney Mall if it comes back because they'll play on that kind of nostalgia. But the view, like you mentioned, the Partridge Family and the Brady Bunch. I almost said the Partridge Family and the Adams Family for some reason. That's a whole different decade of Kings Island. But just the view of the Skyride going in front of the tower, I think was just perfect, and it was absolutely incredible. But yeah, you're right. It lasted 2 years after the incident. I was always under the belief that the incident is what put it on the board as far as like, do we really want to have this thing anymore?
I mean, it might have, when you think about it now, there's that wind and that hail and all that, and just, the weather conditions that you look today, and it's not just Kings Island, it's parks throughout the country.
Mhm.
And the storms are approaching, they don't wait until it gets there to shut down rides. I mean, they're doing it in advance to make sure that nobody is on any of the rides, especially the rides that have a height to them. And sometimes, guests will look in the sky and are like, it's clear, there's nothing happening, but it's coming. And you just don't want to get in that situation that if something did happen with a ride, that you're in that situation again. So I think that's one of the things that helped, shape the industry a little bit, to what you see today is there's no chances. If it's coming and it's 15, 20 miles out, whatever it is, but it's getting there, they're going to shut the rides down.
So you mentioned that some of the gondolas clogged together. Was that weather related? Did that affect the operation of the ride?
I don't know if it happened right before that, or the storm got there, or was they were moving across on the cable, and then here comes the storm. I don't know exactly what happened with that. I just know that while they were up there, there was definitely the wind and the hailstorm, and the gondolas were swinging a little bit. The guests. It was obviously a very scary situation, for those that were in the gondolas, those guests. Uh, but they had the fire departments came out, and they had the ladder go up. At the highest point, it was 90 feet.
Mhm.
So you had to climb down this ladder, and I know that there's still guests, the guests that were on those, they're still around, and some of them still mentioned I was on one of the gondolas sometimes when you would see posts about that ride. So yeah, but just one of those situations that overshadow the history of that ride at the park.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. What's funny is they've built some since then, and I don't know what kind of provisions they have now. I mean, obviously Disney has their Skyliner thing, and that wholeness. But I remember riding the Skyride at Busch Gardens Tampa, which has not reopened since COVID, and being about 30 feet above a bunch of lions. And all I could think about was the time that Kings Island Skyride closed, and I was like, "How are they gonna get me out of here if I'm suspended 30 feet above these lions?" And then they wanna bring in, like, a bucket truck to get me out. That's
Yeah.
funny. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I just did the Skyride in at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. So I just, recently rode that, and it brought back a lot of memories of riding the Skyride at Kings Island.
it's, I've made it very clear that I like Busch Gardens Williamsburg better than I like Busch Gardens Tampa. The one thing Tampa has better is their Skyride with their, because you go over the animals more. But the Williamsburg one, I like it because it's 3 stations because 'cause it's got the, that's like a triangle layout. I think that's so cool. You can go over the dogs and stuff, but I really enjoy that. I actually made a point to make sure I rode each station, on the Skyride at Busch Gardens Williamsburg.
Yeah, and it's the same thing when I go to Cedar Point.
Mhm.
I'm definitely going to ride the Skyride, the carousel, and the train. Those are three must dos for me. But just the old school, type attractions, and I miss it.
I do too. Well, here's to one day bringing it back. Let's hope. You know. All right. So that was the Skyride. It was there and then it wasn't apparently. I'm Ryan Sir along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.